Hi. As a field service provider, you'll want to focus on your customers because they are the lifeblood of your business. From the customer's view in ReachOut, you're able to view a customer's entire history with you and book new work orders or audits for them. In fact, you can track all your customer interactions from within the customer's view. Here's, for example, a list of customers, and we might get a call from one of them, and quickly we can search for their name, pull up their record, and now look at the customer details associated with them, and we can get a good sense of what's been happening in the short recent past. All of the calls that we have with the customer can be recorded here. First off, we have the basics, contact information, including the customer ID number. We're showing 3 different locations for this customer. Here they are listed in a table way, but you can also see them on the map above. Here you have different tabs that show the number of tickets, the number of inspections, the number of work orders, and any invoices that are now being worked on for this customer. I can also have a look at the different sites that are associated with a location. So here not only do we have 3 locations, but each location might have multiple sites. And those sites might have what we call entities. Entities are just a further refinement of perhaps something that you want to use as a inspection object. So for example, the 5 entities here are all listed here as forklifts of with various names, and they're located at the 2 sites, Warehouse B and Warehouse A, all at the same location. So you have a very rich way to describe the customer and the associated elements that you'll be working with that customer as you do inspections and audits and as you take calls from a call center. Incidents and calls can be recorded as a ticket. That's very straightforward. Talk about what you do if you're an inspection manager. And here you'll probably want to work in a view of all the inspections, so you can organize those and see them all pretty much at a glance. And if you go to the inspection home, you can see here a list of all the active inspections. There's 22. They're in these different statuses. These are all, statuses that you can relabel, redefine. You can remove status, add status if your workflow requires. And here's a heads up about things that you want to be aware of, things that are coming due or that are overdue. The listing here that you see is one way to look at the inspections that we have active, but you can also look using this card view, which I personally find to be a little more attractive and informative at the same time. Let's have a look at one of these inspections. Now, we can have all kinds of inspections. You can have internal process audits, you can have asset inspections, you can have supplier audits. These are, whatever it is that you might have. In this particular audit, we've got a presentation now of summary information. It shows where the customer is, what the results of the audit were. Here we can see that there was a 92% compliance, and you might say, what does that mean? I'll show you what that means in just a second. But you can see that there were 7 questions. 7 of the questions were in compliance, and there were no questions that indicated non-compliance. Here's an optional component for tracking an invoice that might be, if you thought that was necessary as part of your workflow, to have the invoicing accompany a inspection that can be managed as well with our system here. If we want to look at more detailed results, there's a detail tab, again, just summarizing things a little more graphically. You can see that with 92% compliance, correction costs are those kind of costs where if you find a finding, you may want to also provide an estimate to address the finding. And we do provide that in our internal workflow, but for this simple case, we're not going to get into that. If I want to look at the details of the inspection that we conducted, this is a very short one just to illustrate. Here you can look at the questions according to their category. There are none that are not compliant, so there are nothing here to show. But if we look down at the details of this particular audit, you can see how they've been structured. Here we have the answers to the question. In this case, it's a radio button type answer, but we have other options available. And with each of the answers, we can put a score next to it that does two things. One, it can tell us, is the answer one that is compliant with the standard or with the criteria that we want to monitor? And also, we can associate a scoring value to give us a kind of a goodness result. And here we can see in the first answer that being certified to ISO 9001 is not only compliant, it warrants a 100% factor for that particular score question. If you look at the other questions, they're similarly structured for the purposes of our talking about it here. And then you can see that when you add these up and average them out, how we came up with a 92% compliance. Now, let's work through an example here. If I go back and I want to create another inspection just to show you how from scratch, very quickly, how this is organized. We're working with the same customer, so I'm not going to bother to change it here just for speed purposes. But we are going to give it this inspection a name, and let's call it John's inspection. And we can set these parameters here. These are all configurable in ReachOut. You can have different priorities, different statuses. As I've said, you can define different kinds of categories, but these are all optional. You're only required to have the items that are flagged with a red asterisk, which means we want to have here a planned start date and time, and we have this clever little picker which gives us the date, and let's just make it for right about now, and give us a window here of a few hours to complete that inspection in. It could be any time in the future. Here we want to put some descriptive material. This will all get transmitted with this inspection to the person who needs to do it. So this would be a quick description of some information that could be useful. So maybe contact the manager to get into the building. Okay, so a simple trivial example there. Here the only thing for an inspection besides those attributes we've already talked about that you need to provide is to select a form. Now I'm going to illustrate again that you have sites, and so here we have at this location we have two sites, maybe warehouse A. At warehouse A we've got these different objects that now I want to do a inspection against. So I'll pick, let's say, the Crown forklift. And for each entity, I can associate already forms, so I don't have to do anything more. It automatically knows what kind of inspection I want to conduct. But if I wanted to, I could, have other kinds of forms that I would prefer to have instead. That's pretty much what you absolutely need at this point. But there are optional things. We could ask that the inspector check in, which means he could or she could indicate from their app, the ReachOut app, that they are en route to an assignment, or when they arrive at the assignment, when they're actually working and in progress, executing the inspection. They can take breaks and indicate that, and all of that through the check-in, check-out procedure. And when they're done, they can indicate that they are now finished. And when they check in and check out, it's not only giving their time, so that's information that can be used for timesheet purposes, but also their GPS coordinates, so you can know they were on site when they were inspecting, in this case, the forklift, you know exactly where they were when they were doing it. They weren't in the coffee shop kind of making things up. You can also have the invoices, and that means that what we call the field agent or the technician that's doing the inspection, that they can create an invoice. You can make these things mandatory by clicking in these boxes. And you can ask for a customer signature that they be collected at the end of the process. And so this would be the sequence 1, 2, 3. You'd go through and do this. I'm not going to ask that the inspection include that in this particular one. At the bottom, it's now possible to assign this to an agent. We could do it either to a team and let the team leader then assign it to individuals on a particular individual on his team, or you could assign it directly to one of the one of the people in the field yourself. But most often, we will be saving inspection requests, particularly ones that are in the future, so that we can organize a routing that makes sense. And so to help us at that point, when we're ready to actually assign this new inspection, this is one approach you can take. You can go to the scheduler view, and here we have a list of all of our tasks that we have in the system. And here, if I select this task, I can see and maybe adjust, if necessary, the window in which I want this inspection to occur. But once I'm happy that I have that, the system will then recommend which agent I should apply if I had many agents. In this case, we only have a couple of agents defined in the system, so I'm going to select Mary. I'm going to assign that to Mary. And you can see that it got moved into Mary's queue, and that, wait a minute, Mary's got an overlap here, so maybe we need to make an adjustment. So I can now move this over so that perhaps she has a little bit of time to get to the next job as necessary. And then when I make all those changes, I can publish and notify. And that sends out a notice to the agents, particularly the ones that have been affected by that change. Going to the pipeline view, this is a way for us to organize the inspections that we're working with. And here we created this John's inspection and we assigned it. And these statuses are automatically managed, or can be, or you can override them, or you can make it completely manual. And if you override it, for example, I got a call and perhaps we've already, we were able to get to this job way ahead of schedule. I want to then close it out. I can just move it over to the closed status and work that way. Similarly, if your use of ReachOut is one that requires use of managing your people in the field to deliver services rather than inspections, you can use the work order module. And the work order module looks very similar and operates very similarly to as the inspection management module does. Here we're looking at a list of work orders, and I can move that to the card view, and you can see all of the relevant material here about each of the work orders that have been created. Let's suppose we now want to create one for our purposes here, just to quickly give you a sense of how you create a work order. So again, I'll leave the customer here the same, and you have to give it a unique ID, which it gets automatically, but you can now give it a unique, it doesn't have to be unique, but a name that you can find it with. So call it John's work order, meaning it was created by John. I have these optional characteristics. Again, these are different than the priority and status settings of the inspection module, so you can set those uniquely for your organization. And similarly, categories, you can have work orders, categories that make sense for your workflows. Let's set again quickly some of these parameters here for the start date and time of the work order. Maybe this is a service window. Maybe this is the time the work needs to be done in. So we need to provide enough time to do the work. Provide a description of what it is that that needs to happen. And here we have instructions. Again, it's simply a text field, so you can monitor, provide information for the agent. Agent being, of course, the technician or whoever it is that's going to be in the field. As we did before, we could make the assignment right now if that was a sensible thing from our workflow. If that was how your organization works, we can certainly accommodate that. But usually you'll want to wait. That's why those things are not in red, don't have red flags on them. Here are some optional things that you can do for managing work orders. So here we can, again, have a check-in, check-out process so that the person who's been assigned this will be asked to check in. You can make this mandatory, or again, you can leave it as an optional thing, and it will provide, again, that timekeeping information. So maybe for billing purposes or payroll purposes, how much time the person is working on the job. You also know, again, when they check in and check out, their GPS location there, and so you can verify they were at the work site during the time that they were saying they were there. These are optional things, and you can delete them. I'm going to delete this from the list. You can also request that an estimate be created. So an example might be a plumbing job. Plumber goes on site and they want to cost the job out before the client gives them the go-ahead. Here's how you can request them to do that. You can make this a mandatory step or make it an optional step. And the tools in the app are available. We won't show that in this particular slide presentation, but we will show you, you will be able to see how the app works later. Now, with the app, they'll be able to create the estimate. And here you can help them by creating a template of an estimate that contains common items, common materials, common service categories, and their costs, so that when they, and you can name it and pull them up dynamically when you're creating the work order so that the agent has that information handy. I'm going to not require that kind of information. Here, the idea is to include a form. This might be a checklist that you would like to provide the person in the field. So you might give them some, like a work completion checklist and ask them to please go through each step and verify they did that. It's completely optional unless you require it. Here's an invoice component. So you can enable, again, based on whether it's appropriate for your workflow to have the technician in the field create an invoice for the customer, and you can elect to have the customer sign off on that to approve that the work was done. That can also include a customer signature with as a sign off on the quality of the work, and get feedback about your service quality that way. I'm going to delete that from the work order, and that's how I would send it out. Or I could elect to do none of that and just choose a package that's already existing with different options in it. But I'm not going to pull that in right now. I'm going to save this work order, come into my scheduler view again, and I can see that here's my work order, and I now need to assign it to someone. You will notice that that same work order is actually down here. This is another way to do the assignment. So I've got John's work order, and now if I want to assign it to Mary, again, I can move it into a slot that I think works for Mary. That works nicely if it's in the same day. And when I finish my assignment of all, there might be many work orders up here before I undertake this step, I can publish and notify. And now that will go out and alert the, in this case, Mary, that she has a new job on her smartphone. Again, just like in inspection, you can look at the pipeline view to manually make adjustments to the automatic workflow assignments. And here we've got John's work order that we just worked. We had assigned it to Mary. And again, maybe something happened and I need to kind of interrupt the kind of automated flow here of the status, and maybe I want to make this completed for my workflow. Again, all of these statuses are completely, customizable by you, and the workflow that's associated with each step can also be customized. Collecting all this data is also important, and here we've got very standard reports. We have audit trail reports and we have some reports, and these come with their own kind of report builder that you can keep in your own category here. And you can create your own reports either up here using the Create Report button. But let's suppose we look at inspections and I want to look at a report that said, all my overdue inspections today. I can use the canned report to do that, and it shows me these various categories or attributes for each inspection that's currently overdue. And the nice thing about the reporting feature here is that I can export it and I can put these results out into an Excel format. But maybe before I do, maybe I want to make some adjustments here. And this is a quick look at how the report writing is organized. You simply set, choose the module, inspection work order, set some criteria for when you want records to be pulled in. Here we're doing before today, right now, and when the status fits all of these categories. In other words, it's not been closed. It's basically what this says. Closes the only way to get out of the open status. And here we're going to show the report categories, and perhaps one thing I would like to see that I don't have in the current report is perhaps show the due date. So I know when it's overdue, but I also know what date it was overdue at. So now I can apply this and save it. And now I can have a version of this report, call it John's report. Whoops. And there we go. We can put whatever we want for a description. So now my reports, when I go to the reports in my reports view, I can look at my reports the way I want the report to come in, and here I can see the due dates being shown. There's other things we can show you about ReachOut, but in the interest of time, we're going to cut it off right here. Thanks very much for your time. Keep in mind, by the way, that you can sign up for ReachOut with our free tier, which is a fully functional system with all the features, and your first 3 users are yours for free. So we only start to charge fees for the 4th and later users. So you have time to train up, get comfortable using the tool. You don't have to be paying for it while you're learning. You can get comfortable, and then only when you're ready to go live do you have to start paying. So there you go. Thanks very much. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye now.